Hi, this is Louis Gossett Jr., and you're watching SCV-TV, the Santa Clarita Valley Television, right here.
Hi there. My name is Philip Scorza, and I would like to welcome you to our show Points of Interest. As a resident of the Santa Clarita Valley and a student of history, I have found some really interesting places in our area. One of the most interesting by far is the oil boom town called Mentryville. What say, never heard of Mentryville? Well, if you drive down Lyons Avenue heading west, past Interstate 5, past the Taco Bell, I know that's hard to do, drive down this windy country road for about 2.5 miles, you will come to this place right behind me called Mentryville. Mentryville is an oil boom town that got its start in 1875. The people who live here now, Carol and Frenchy Lagasse, have been keepers of the flame, so to speak, and I would like to introduce you to them now. Come on in here. This is Frenchy. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And this is Carol. Good morning. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the buildings behind us here?
This building right behind us is the mule barn, and it was built about 1887, just about the same time the main house was. And it kind of made the entrance to the canyon right at this point.
So this was always the entrance here?
Yeah. And then right behind, next to that is the old chicken house, where they raised all their chickens for their eggs and feathers, and they used feathers in a lot of decorating and what have you. And then that tin building, that gray tin building, is the garage that was built in the 1920s, when the people had more cars then, and they needed to have a cover for their cars. And they fixed a deal in the center of the garage where they could go underneath and change their oil.
So they had a pit under there then? Yeah. I was just wondering about this up here. Did they do any hangings here by any chance?
No, they used to put the hay in upstairs there, and then they had a grain deal, and then they had chutes going down to the stalls for the mules, and that's the way they fed them. They brought them in at night, and then mule was the most important commodity then, you know.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Let's also tell you that the entrance, the gate wasn't here, the gate was over a little bit farther on the other side of the monument. And that's really actually the way the road was at the time.
No, they didn't have many looky-loos then, you know, because people didn't have many cars and what have you, and they didn't come wandering around on Sunday drivers and things like that.
Well, another thing, too, you could only be invited to Mentryville at the time because the people is today. We invite people to come in, just as we've invited you to come in today. So,
you're going to give us a tour of the whole place? We're going to walk around?
Okay.
Can we go take a look at the house now?
Okay,
Let's go. Now, tell me about the house. When was the house built?
The house was built, I think, started in 1887 and finished in 1889. Someone told me at one time that they had an open house Christmas party in 1889. And in fact, several of the people that were still alive said they came to the party when they were just children, like 6 years old or something like this. And of course, they're passed away now. And then Mr. Mentry's niece told me that she came and stayed in the one room up here, and it was in 1892, so we know that it was built before the 1900s. and it's all made out of redwood. And of course, it had to be shipped from up in the northern California, and by railroad. And of course, we know the railroad was here in 1876.
Right.
And so the niece told me that it cost quite a bit of money for redwood to build this house. And I said, well, you know, redwood's still expensive today. So
this is the richest man in town, had the biggest house in town, right? This is sort of like It's a Wonderful Life over
this
here.
is what it was called, the big house.
The big house.
Yeah, everybody
Okay.
called it the big house. In fact, when Frenchy and I started working on the house in 1966, well, people would come to the gate, and they would say, they would write or call some of their friends that knew about the house, and they said, oh, the big house is being restored. So that's the reason, as I said, it was always called the big house. And by pictures that we have seen of other small houses in the canyon, you could understand this was called the big house.
Oh, sure. Now, obviously, as we can see back there's been quite a bit of earthquake damage. You were living in the house and sleeping in the house when the earthquake hit?
Yes, and we were actually in the bedroom over to the left, upstairs, and when the earthquake hit. And
that's when the porch fell down, the chimney came off?
At the same time.
Right.
And then we had a friend that was sleeping in the back bedroom also. And these are the two bedrooms that were the less damaged. And we feel that our guardian angels was watching out for.
Oh, obviously somebody was watching out for you. I'm sorry we can't go inside and take a look around, though. Is there a lot of damage inside?
Quite a bit of damage inside.
Yeah,
and but it was a terrific noise when this porch fell off.
I'll bet it
and
was.
the house shook. What happened is the house went up and down, like most of the earthquake did from the North Ridge. You know, they said everything went up and down.
Right.
And then ours, we have a fault behind the house, and so then it hit that fault and it slid us off to the. That's the reason the porch and everything fell.
Now, you're off the foundation, right, Frenchy?
Yeah, the house was built on stilts and with corbels, and when it came up, the house dropped 3 feet down and then 2 feet to the west. So it was. That's why the porch fell off.
We should make mention that it can be put back together. It can be fixed,
It
right?
can be fixed. I mean, they could jack it back up. They'll have to build a complete new porch, so.
That's okay. Yeah.
But
yeah.
but as far
But
as
the integrity of the house, the structure, etc.,
yeah,
that's
it
still
can be-
strong.
they can get it back to looking just the way it was.
Okay, I'm standing here now. I'm waiting for the second stage of the day to come in, right? This is the place where the stage is pulled up to?
Right, and this little platform right here was built special, so when the stagecoach came in, it would come right up practically against it, and then the people could step right off onto this little platform. And they didn't, and women especially had these big hoop skirts. They didn't get them caught in the stage doorway or the stairs and stuff like that on the stage.
Right.
Because the stages were always built way up.
Yes.
And this eliminated that big step down they had.
Right. It was if I remember correctly, it was the Telegraph Stage Company or something like that.
Well,
Was it from Newhall?
Yeah, it was over in Newhall. It's where the cemetery, they had the stage company over where the cemetery is now, Eternal Valley. And then the stage driver was also the bootlegger, because they didn't allow any booze in the canyon here for the workers.
So he was a good man to know then.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And he would bring in these bitters and this whiskey in these small flasks, and then the guys would go into the little privies and they would drink their bottle, and then they'd throw the empty down in privy. And that was the best place in the world to dig for old bottles.
I'll bet it was. Although I don't want the job. We're going to take a walk. Frenchy and I are going to go up to the schoolhouse now. Shall we go?
Okay.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about the early years. Now I know that to begin with, it was they were just drilling for oil here. There was no town first.
They had different booms, you know, when they would come in and hit a pretty good well. Then they would have a what they call an oil boom. They'd start hiring people and bringing them in, and they would cut new locations and what have you. And at different times, they had it all through the 1800s and the early 1900s. They had these booms. And
houses just went up haphazard. There was no organized pattern.
They built these. They were made by 1 by 12 redwood, and they just used a stripping.
So the houses would just basically be placed in between the oil derricks then?
That's right. Wherever the pipelines were is where they built the houses, because they could tie onto the water and the gas. Because this is the only place they had any gas.
I was going to say, speaking of gas, this is the first town that was entirely lit by natural gas, is it right?
Natural gas in the main house there. Every room had natural gas chandeliers, which was, they only had in the elite places.
Right.
And
they also lit, I understand, they lit tennis courts, croquet fields, horseshoe pits. So this place was really lit up then.
Yeah, that's right. And they also had a little auditorium next to the schoolhouse, which is where we're traveling now.
Right.
And but the people would, when they left, would either sell their houses to somebody. They'd sell the whole house for $50, or else they would tear it apart and pull all the nails and straighten them, and then take the house with them and build a house like down in Newhall and stuff like that.
So it was sort of a nomadic lifestyle then, wasn't it?
Well, the wood was important because they didn't have that much, but nails were really more important because most of them were handmade by blacksmiths.
I understand you had a blacksmith shop here, and there was a machine shop here.
Well, Mr. Mentry had 3 houses in the canyon, and every house that he had, he always had a blacksmith shop put near his house, because he would go out into the field and they would run onto a situation like fishing for something that was broke. And he had to manufacture a certain kind of a tool that would fish that, whatever the situation was.
Sure, so he was very handy, very innovative that way.
His whole family were blacksmiths back in France. And his father came with him here, and he was a blacksmith. And it was an important thing in France to be a blacksmith. It was an honor.
I was just wondering, did you have there was a post office here, right?
No, the post office, they would take the mail in on the stage.
Oh, I
and
see.
it would go into Newhall, and over at the stagecoach place, they had their post office there.
No,
they did have a bakery here.
I was going to say, they didn't have a store here, but eventually in 1897 somebody built a bakery here?
Yeah, Mr. Coachum. He worked 12 hours. He was a pumper here, and he worked 12 hours going around, and then went to the wells. And then when he got off, he would fire up his ovens at this bakery he made, and he would bake bread and donuts and what have you. And then his daughter would go in on the stage in the morning with a whole supply of baked goods, and then she would come back on the afternoon stage, and she always sold everything she had because it was really important.
Sure. So they fulfilled a need then, huh?
That's right.
That's
and
right.
It helped them out too.
Oh, I'm sure it did.
They had a big family, see.
Yeah. Well, we're at the schoolhouse here now. Denise is going to come on camera, and she's going to take Carol for a tour of the schoolhouse, because one thing you should know about Denise, she's a real professional school teacher. So let's go.
Well, thanks, Phil, but I think we'd have a lot more informative repartee here if Carol took me on the tour. We're here at Felton School, and Carol's going to be telling us about who was here and when it opened and how it got started. Carol?
The school started in 1885. At that time, it was only one room school, and it was just in the other part. And this other part was built on later. The school, as I said, opened in 1885 and went until 1932 when the Depression came, because it wasn't very many children that was in the area at that time.
Well, how many started out the school? How many kids?
They said that it was usually about 13 children. And I think that was about the most that they had at one time, and it went from first grade through 8th grade.
Wow. What do you think that might be like?
And, well, I have a schedule of one of the teachers, Mrs. Burson, who was Miss Mace at the time. You had to be single, and usually they only taught school 1 year. She was able to teach 2 years here. And so I was privileged to meet her, and she told me so many stories about the school and the people who lived in the canyon. And she gave me a schedule, and it was quite a schedule for a school teacher to teach 8 grades.
I can't imagine. Phil wanted us to imagine, but we're not old enough to do that.
It was about like a 15-minute for each subject. And she told me that on the weekends, since she was single and they were not able to do a lot of dating and things like this, and they were very, very strict with the school teachers, that they would take the children all the way to Newhall. They would walk from here to Newhall, and she would do biology and science projects going to Newhall. They would talk about a lot of plants and birds and rocks and all kinds of things, she
Field
said.
stuff, just like we
Uh-huh,
do now.
yeah. But they walked,
Yeah.
which was, what, about 9 miles to Newhall. But she said usually they would always get a ride back from someone.
Thank heavens.
Yeah.
Well, let's go in and take a look at that schedule and find out what's going on. And recess is over. The bell has rung. Come with us. Well, the first thing here we come into is...
This is the cloakroom, or the where the children would hang their coats and their hats, and also their lunch pails. But they didn't have that many lunch pails. But once in a while, a child would come, maybe from Rice Canyon or Towsley, to come over from school. Mr. Larnon, who lived right down the road from us, he came to school here, and sometimes he would bring his lunch. And occasionally there would be a lunch pail in here. The teacher always brought her lunch because she never left the school. This is the library, and this door was always kept closed. And this is a little opening. Of course, you can't see it from where you are, but this is a little opening. And the children one of the children would be a librarian for each day. And the children would ask for the books through there. Books were very, very important because it costs a lot of money for books. And so that is the reason that they were kept usually under lock and key.
My goodness.
So
Well, let's
we
go
go
into
into
the
the library.
library, shall we? If you are interested in Smiley's Geography, and I think you ordered this one, here's for you. Bring it back tomorrow in good condition. And here we are in the library. Carol, tell us about this.
Well, this was a very, very important room in the schoolhouse, and because, as I say, the books were very scarce, and so the library was important to the school. I'd like to tell you about this picture of Mr. Mentry's son, who was a famous jockey, and his picture is in the Kentucky Museum. He rode horses in Canada, New York, and because it didn't ride him in California too much later. And he rode Man of War to his first victory. And this is a picture of Man of War.
But he went to school here, didn't he?
Yes, he went to school here, and he was actually the second son of Mr. Mentry. And I have a picture of him in his jockey clothes here. And also it tells about, a little snap there, tells about when he went to World War I and all this. I'd like to tell you also about the bookcases.
Are these original?
These aren't the original. The originals were torn down. But a Boy Scout troop built these.
Oh, nice.
And they were, this one young man did it for his Eagle Scout project. And but these books here, some of these books here are Mr. Judge Powell's, who was the first judge of Soledad District. And these are his law books that he had. And so we hope that they will be preserved.
You were showing this to me before. These were the feathers that you and your family were collecting?
Yes. My youngest daughter and I, she was only 4 years old when we moved here, so we always went out goody hunting, and some of these are the feathers, and some of the just little things that we have collected. We also have, so you can see I have all kinds of feathers. We also collected a lot of artifacts, rocks, for instance, seashells, because in the sea, when they drilled the oil wells, of course, they went down in and brought up seashells, and so we collected these as we found. This is an Indian hammer that we found, and Mr. Perkins, who was our historian here for many years in Newhall, said that this was put into a fork of an oak tree. And then was strapped in, and then this would be a hammer. And the Indians really didn't stay here in Mentryville, but they came for the acorns. And that is
Are those the Tataviam Indians?
Yes, and this is the reason that I found this too, is that part of this.
And the
these
ink
are
wells.
ink wells. These are some of the ink bottles that I found, that I dug up. I found one dump. And because other people had dug here many, many years ago. And I found one dump, and I call it my mysterious dump. And these are some of the ink wells, ink bottles rather, that we found. And we found a lot of different type of petrified bones and fossils, and of course more. This is like the lunch pails that they had. And of course you can see all my feathers. And these are all, as I say, different types of rocks that I have found. My youngest daughter and I found.
Let's go into the main room and see what life was like in school in the 1800s. Carol, tell us about this model we're seeing in front of us.
This was made by the miniature club of our area, and this was made by boys and girls, mothers and dads, and it is of the Little Felton School. It's 1 inch per foot, and Mrs. Burson, who was Miss Mace, this is her. This is supposed to depict her as teaching her children.
And who's that girl in white over there?
The little girl in the white is a lady who lives in Yucca Valley now. And
how do you know that?
well, I'll tell you how I know that. She came here as when we had our reunion in 1976. I had a 100th anniversary party. And so we invited all of the children that we knew and all the teachers we knew. At that time, we had 5 teachers and quite a few students. And this is Doris Galbraith, Delight, her name is now. And she knew that was her because she always brought her dolly to school with her. And as she stood there and looked at her in there, she started crying. And she said, "That's me." I'd like to show you also one important thing, a piece of furniture that was acquired, and this is Mr. Mentry's desk. We do not know if he had it in this home alone or whether he had it in Placerita home before he moved here, because he had 2 other homes here before he had it. But anyway, it was made in Chicago, and this was his desk. Also, he had other things that we have here too. Is the 2
sideboards. Well, let's take a walk around the room here, and over here we have class colors, flowers, motto. Tell us about that.
Well, this is also, Miss Mace told us their colors were blue and gold, and their flowers were lupin and daisies, and their motto was, which I thought was quite interesting, is "We have crossed the bay and the ocean lies before us." And I thought that was kind of nice to see. A lot of these things that we have here in the schoolroom have actually been donated. Children who have came to the school, you can see they've written me notes and drawn me pictures, and I really do appreciate all what the children have done.
Let's go over to the school prayer. They had a school prayer that's very different from today.
Yes, the school teacher, again, who taught here 1915 to 1917, said this was their school prayer that they sang every morning.
They sang?
They sang, and
Do you
I'll
know
try
it?
to sing it by what
Will
she
you?
has. And it goes like this. Now, before we work today, we must not forget to pray to God who kept us through the night and brought us to the morning light. Help us, Lord, to love Thee more than we ever have before, in our work and in our play. So now be with us, Lord, today. And I think that was a lovely
Well, that's a
thing.
great way to begin a day.
I want to tell you also that I have this on tape by the school teacher.
Oh, wonderful.
These are the original light fixtures.
And they had a
This one,
stove?
and then they had 2. I have a light fixture that was over here that had 2 lights on it.
Right.
And I said and they had a potbelly stove, but you must remember they did not have wood to
Right.
burn, and they used natural gas. And Mr. Mentry invented the stove, more or less. He took the iron, the old cast iron wood stove, and he lined it with fire brick, and then they shot the flame onto the fire brick, and that's just how they heated the school. I think it's a lovely little school.
It is beautiful.
We have had a lot of pupils come here from all over Santa Clarita Valley that has came to school here and actually has held class in here several times.
My goodness.
And the children love it. From the preschool, which was like 4 years old, on up until you have through the 8th grade. The children love the school. I don't know what's going to happen to the school now, but we just did the best we could, and we loved all the people that was here, and we loved all those children who came from all the schools to have a day in a one-room school.
Let's join the others outside.
Tell me a little bit about your participation here. How did you happen to come to live here and then take charge of the house? And you've been here 30 years, what?
Well, I started working for the oil company in 1947 after I got out of the service, and we came over and worked on the house and repaired at different times when people were living here. And in 1966, Mr. Manzer moved out, and the house became available, but the company was going to tear it down because it had gotten so bad, and all the plumbing and everything else had deteriorated so much. So I came over and looked underneath the house and saw that the structure was really still sound, and then no termites had messed it up or anything like that. So I asked them if I could get permission to restore it. And after a bunch of hemming and hawing around, and they said, well, they didn't want to spend the money on it, but I told them I would spend my own money. And they said, okay, so we put our house up for sale in Saugus and started working on it then even. And we worked 18 hours a day sometimes, way into the night, killing the bees and patching up holes and what have you, plastering. And after 10 months of working on it, we was able to get it where it looked pretty good, so we moved in June of 1967.
And you raised your family here?
Yeah, we raised 3 daughters, Nanette, Laurette, and Suzette. And now we have our grandchildren coming quite a bit too. But since the earthquake now, we're going to move on to Lebec. And the property has been acquired by the Santa Monica Conservancy, so we'll see what happens after they get going on it.
Well, for everybody, I'd like to thank you for your participation in taking care of this valuable historical property. Well, we're here to say goodbye and thank Carol and Frenchy for the visit and the tour of Mentryville. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, and we hope that the future will be bright for both of you too.
Thank you.
And for you too also.
Thank you very much.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
After you do your ending, we'll tell you.
Okay. For Points of Interest, this is Philip Scorza. Thank you for joining us.
And Denise Ruth Scorza, class dismissed.
I was trying to get everything done before the party, the decorations and the cake and the balloons and everything, and I was rushing, Carlos. I was rushing like mad, and I turned around just for 1 second, and there was a really loud whistle. I slammed on the brakes. Big one. Train came. I was scared.
Look, listen, and live, or someone you love will get hurt.
Sweetheart, you're safe.